Hey everyone, welcome back to the Listen Up Girl podcast, your go-to for everything happening in the LGBTQ plus world right now. I am your host, Zach Randles-Friedman, and today's episode is a big one. We're diving into stories that span everything, from groundbreaking visibility in sports to political tensions here in the United States to global decisions that impact our community and some deeply emotional moments that remind us what's really at stake. Some of the stories are going to inspire you, others are going to frustrate you, and at least one may stop you in your tracks. So let's get right into it. A historic moment in soccer. We're starting with a story that feels small on the surface, but is actually massive. Christian Dobrik, a 29-year-old coach with German Bundesliga club FC St. Pauli, has come out publicly as gay, becoming the first coach from a man's Bundesliga club to do so in the media. Now, if you don't follow European football, you might not immediately understand the weight of this. Men's professional soccer has long been one of the most resistant spaces when it comes to LGBTQ plus visibility. Players don't come out, coaches don't come out, staff stays silent. Not because they want to, but because historically it hasn't felt safe. Dubrick didn't just casually mention this, he worked with journalists for months to tell his story the right way. And that tells you everything. This wasn't impulsive, it was intentional. And moments like this matter because they send a message to the next generation. You can exist here, you can lead here, and you don't have to hide. So I am so proud of this guy for doing this, and it's amazing because we need more people to do this. Next, Pride visibility still under attack in Texas. So let's shift to something happening right here in the United States, and it's a lot less uplifting. Again, in Dallas, the state has begun removing Rainbow Pride and Black Lives Matter crosswalks following an order from Governor Greg Abbott. But here's the part that's really sticking with people. These crosswalks were not funded by taxpayers. They were funded by the community. So what we're seeing is this strange and frustrating contradiction where community-funded symbols of inclusion are being removed using public funds. Residents are understandably upset because these crosswalks aren't just paint, they're visibility, they're acknowledgement. There is a signal that people belong. And when those symbols are removed, it sends a message to whether that's the intention or not. But here's the flip side. Every time something like this happens, communities tend to push back even harder, finding new ways to show up, to create visibility, and to refuse to disappear. I am so happy I don't live in that state of Texas anymore. The year and a half I spent there was the longest year and a half of my life because it is such a backwards ass state. Next, Pride Nights push forward. And that brings us to the next story because with some places are pulling back, others are doubling down. Major sports teams are continuing to host Pride Nights despite increasing political pressure around anything labeled woke. The Nashville Predators recently hosted their 2026 Pride Night, unveiling special branding and merchandise to celebrate LGBTQ plus fans. And this might seem like a small gesture, but it's not. Sports culture is one of the most visible and influential parts of society. So when teams choose to continue these events, they are making a statement. We're not backing down, we're not excluding people, and we're not pretending fans don't exist. That kind of visibility matters, especially right now. Next, we go to Gavin Newsom and the politics of tone. So let's talk about something a little more complicated. California Governor Gavin Newsom is facing criticism over his tone, specifically what critics are calling gay jokes. And yes, the loudest voice criticizing him are the far-right Republicans who have consistently opposed LGBTQ rights, which makes the criticism feel a little rich. But here's where it gets interesting. Even some people who support Newsom are starting to ask, is his approach working? For months, he's adopted a style that mirrors that orange convicted felon's social media playbook, aggressive, sarcastic, and sometimes intentionally proactive. And while that may energize certain audiences, it also raises a bigger question. At what point does a strategy start to blur the message? Because when everything becomes a punchline, you risk losing the substance. That said, Newsom isn't just talking. He's backing major political moves, including redistricting push that could add 5 Democratic seats to California. So this is where things get nuisance. Is this strategic messaging, or is it contributing to the same political noise people are already exhausted by? Next, LGBTQ plus voters, the reality versus the narrative. Now let's zoom out and talk about LGBTQ plus voters, because there's a narrative being pushed right now that doesn't quite match reality. The orange convicted felon recently claimed he has a strong support from the LGBTQ plus community. But the numbers, of course, tell a very different story, because he lives in La La Land. According to exit polls, 86% of LGBTQ plus voters supported Kamala Harris, and only 12% supported him. And according to Pew Research, 83% of queer men typically vote Democratic. And when you look at the policy, it starts to make sense. We're talking about over $1 billion in HIV research funding cuts, the removal of pride flag from the Stonewall National Monument, elimination of LGBTQ options on the 988 crisis hotline. But here's where it gets even more complex. There are LGBTQ plus voters who support him, and those individuals are navigating a very different experience, often finding themselves in spaces where their views don't align with the majority of the community. So this isn't just a political story, it's a controversial about identity, values, and how people make decisions. And when those decisions don't align with the broader group. I mean, you should be able to vote for who you want to, but I just don't understand how somebody in the LGBTQ plus community could support the orange convicted felon. It baffles me, because he is trying to take away all the rights. I mean, trans rights is his main thing that he wants to take away. Like, he wants to steal money and take away transgender rights. So now our next story is Grindr and the question of safety. This next story is heavy but important. A man is calling for change after his partner died following an alleged blackmail scheme connected to Grindr. According to reports, what started as a connection through an app escalated into intimidation and threats. Now he's pushing for stronger protections, including identity verification. And this story highlights something a lot of people don't talk enough about. These platforms are lifelines for connection, especially in places where being openly LGBTQ plus isn't safe. But that same openness can create vulnerabilities. And when safeguards don't keep up with how those apps are actually used, people can get hurt. This is bigger than one case. It's about how we balance connection with safety. Next, a global decision on gender. On the global stage, there's a major development. The United Nations has rejected a proposal to define gender strictly as male or female. That may sound technical, but it's actually huge, because definitions like this shape policy, rights, and recognition. And rejecting that proposal sends a clear message. Gender is not binary, and global institutions are beginning to reflect that reality. And then today, there's a BBC controversy. So let's talk media. The BBC has dropped longtime presenter Scott Mills following an allegation related to personal conduct, but has refused to provide details. And that lack of transparency is what is raising eyebrows. Mills has been one of the most visible gay broadcasters in the UK for decades. He's spoken openly about the pressures of being outed early in his career, something that shaped his journey. So when someone with that kind of history is suddenly removed with no explanation, people start to ask questions. But transparency does matter, especially from publicly funded institutions. Our next story is a message of radical kindness. This next story is one of those moments that cuts through everything else. At a rally in Minneapolis, Jane Fonda read a letter from Rebecca Good, whose wife Renee was fatally shot earlier this year. And the message wasn't about anger, it was about something else. She called for radical kindness. She said, "We choose the side of love." And in a time where everything feels divided, that message hits differently. Jane Fonda is so amazing. She's always stood up for the right thing. And our next story is Billie Jean King speaks up. A voice we've heard for decades. Billie Jean King is once again standing up for trans inclusion. She says, "Listen to their stories, make them feel included." And honestly, that's it. That's the message. And our last story is Community Moments Matter. So before we wrap up, a couple of community updates. Dublin Pride has appointed a new chair, Lynn Tracy, signaling continued growth in leadership. And in Ireland, the Leatherman community is hosting a secondhand fetish gear sale, which, yes, that may sound niche, but it's also a reminder of how diverse, expressive, and culturally rich this community really is. And that's your LGBTQ plus news roundup. These stories, from visibility to politics to safety to community, they're all connected because the center of all this is one thing: people trying to live openly, safely, and authentically. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, share, and leave a review. I'm Zach Randles-Friedman, and this is Listen Up, Girl.